recognizing that visibility, as uncomfortable as it can be, is essential to moving the needle forward in business.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And I'm pumped for this episode. I've got my friend Jessica Sato here, and she is an expert on business growth and visibility. And she helps purpose-driven female entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and change makers clarify their big idea, amplify their message, and create lasting social impact. Now, on a personal note, I met Jessica through a business incubator that we're both a part of, and I was really impressed with how she very clearly and boldly claimed her expertise and her purpose in what she does. So, Jessica, welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Amazing. So I love to ask, because we have a lot of listeners who are in the process of building their business, or they're working through a phase of scaling where maybe they are looking for some inspiration. What inspired you to pursue this as your business? Like, why do?
Well, when you say why do this, I think the answer is different now than what it was then. So I've been an entrepreneur since 2012. And I sort of dabbled in it, I don't know, 2008 maybe. So I've been at it for a long time. And actually what got me started was completely unstrategic. I was asked to come back to my former company as a consultant. And so I literally created a business that would enable me to get paid. Now, fast forward. Right? Like, so there was no, some people are like, yeah, I had a really strong strategy. I made the leap with intention. I did none of that. But with that said, I do think that has in some ways served me because it allowed for some spontaneity and a willingness to just do what was needed in the moment, which I think is important in entrepreneurship. But now fast forward to where I am today. And I have been very much focused in the online space for, I guess, since 2018, working primarily with female entrepreneurs, people who are passionate about creating change, building businesses, etc. The work I'm specifically doing now is really driven by a handful of things. My experience growing up in the Middle East, we can talk about any of these if you want. My experience growing up in the Middle East and working and living and studying in places where people were not actually free, especially women. My work in corporate life and really understanding the value of strategy and strategic decision making. And then through TEDx speaker coaching and kind of pulling all those things together now has gotten me to this place where I'm very passionate about helping the same audience that you have really focus on how to take all those crazy scattered ideas that they have and consolidate those into a very clear, bold, aligned message so that they can speak out and create change and impact in the area that is important to them.
Oh, that's amazing. And I mean, not a typical upbringing.
No.
At all. So you volunteered it like Dish, so give us a little bit of that background and how is that informing your lens today about prioritizing this market, for example?
Yeah, great. So, like I said, I grew up in the Middle East. I lived in Egypt from the ages of 10 to 14, and then I ended up studying abroad there in college. My majors were Arabic and political science. And this was pre 9/11. So, the world was a very, very different place than it is today. And it was in those two big chunks of time, and then in subsequent experiences working in Ethiopia, working in Russia, that I just realized that women are routinely minimized. We know this as women already, but I think as I've reflected back and really thought about what is the impact that I want to make in the world, a lot of that desire, that mission to really elevate women's voices has been informed by my experiences where watching how women's voices have been minimized when they did in fact have the solution. And I believe very strongly that women, particularly marginalized women in marginalized communities especially, they are the closest to the problems, which means we are closest to giving the solutions. And yet our solutions are constantly being hampered. And so I want to be a force in the world, working particularly with entrepreneurs who are uniquely situated, more so than any other group of people, to solve these problems, address issues in industry, what have you. I want to be part of that process of helping equip and empower women to use all of their expertise, their experience, their voices to actually move the needle forward in those spaces.
Boy, oh boy, this could turn into a 4-hour episode very, very quickly, because I actually just shared on social yesterday. I remember being 23 years old and I read this book that changed my absolute life, and it is The Feminine Mistake by Leslie Bennett. So, it's kind of a take on the feminine mystique. I love it. You're writing it down.
I am writing it.
And one of the things, it's basically speaking to the importance of women maintaining their financial independence. I was getting married. I was moving to another country myself. I grew up in remote part of Canada. And I remember when I was in my engineering degree telling my mother at the time, oh yeah, we're equal now. Women are equal now. And she laughed at me and I was like, that's rude. And I went about my life. But by the time I was just 23 years old, I was already seeing like the major disparities of, 50-50 hiring maybe at the corporate level on entry, but what happened at the manager level, what happened at the director level and above. And it wasn't very long before I heard about the alligator chart that a lot of corporations don't want to share, which is just showing the disparity between women and minorities' ascension in their career versus their Caucasian male counterparts typically. And so it led me on this whole journey of learning about unconscious bias. I spent all my waking hours when I was in corporate, like my free time, which as a consultant is
Yeah, what is that?
I mean, that's the time you're supposed to be sleeping. But I was putting all this energy towards addressing this alligator chart problem because I experienced it. And coming back to Leslie Bennett in her book, she described that women are offered so many off-ramps to their financial independence. And, it's really come across for me in my experience where I get really annoyed when I'm in a coaching program or an incubator. I find a lot of the female conversation is about the off-ramps, and it's about how to justify the off-ramps, how to be okay with the off-ramps. And I'm like, why do we do that? So, why aren't we talking about the on-ramps? Because, when I'm in male-based programs and male-led programs, they sure as heck are not talking about imposter syndrome.
No. I love
your
that
take.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, I got to rein it in here. So I love that you're talking about this because this is actually a little side story before I dive in. My husband and I joke about this a lot because I find myself in social settings gravitating toward men and being in the male conversation.
Me too.
And he casually asked me about this. And I said, I can't really pinpoint outright what it is, but I really like this sort of more strategic nature of conversation with men, which is sort of makes me cringe a little bit that I'm actually saying that out loud. But I think it's speaking to your point exactly, which is women have very much been conditionalized to kind of keep it into a box. We know how, in some cases, to play the game. And I think a lot of us are doing a very good job of doing that and working to kind of push those boundaries out. But it's uncomfortable to do that. And so I just think for a lot of people, it's easier to take the off-ramp. It's easier to discuss the off-ramps and to lean into them. I don't know, maybe it's controversial to say, but like sometimes we just want to take the easy way out. And I think this is one of the reasons why I like working with entrepreneurs, especially women entrepreneurs who are driven and passionate and committed, because they're not really focused on that. They're very much focused on what is the end game? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What is the thing I'm trying to address? And they're very proactive in doing that. So they're not, spending a lot of time talking about imposter syndrome. They're very focused on what do I need to do? Who do I need to partner with in order to create whatever that change happens to be. I'm gearing up for, International Women's Day is on March 8th, and I'm gearing up to be the closing keynote speaker at a big event here locally. And
congratulations, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you. And I've been thinking a lot about what is it that I want to talk about. And the focus is very much on investing in women's voices and investing in women's ideas. And I started to think about, well, what does that actually look like? And there's the normal conversation around we need allies, we need to partner with men, we need to sort of change the system. And I think all those things are true. But I actually think the real change is within us and within each other as women. So for us, we have to be willing to say, you know what? I know that there are a lot of systemic and very challenging barriers. And I just should put a little asterisk here that this is me speaking from a place of immense privilege. There are these barriers that are in place, but it is on us to be willing to do the work internally to challenge those barriers. So when someone says, well, you have to be nice, you can't speak too loudly, you have to, make it sound pretty, etc., we have to say, actually, no, I don't need to do that. I'm going to say it the way I really want to say it and the way it needs to be said. And I think as women, we actually have to support each other in doing that work and support each other's work in doing this. So, gosh, that was a long answer to your off-ramps.
Dear listener, you are watching like some bestie business buddy formation happening like before your very eyes. I'm just so in love with Jessica. So, okay. I love this. And in response to the idea that we have to take so much personal responsibility, I've never said this out loud, and I'm so excited that you're getting this out of me. I realized somewhere along the way that because I was going to be my truth, speak my truth, i.e., I am a mother. Yes, I live in suburbia. Yes, I do have the different priorities. All of those things are true. Somewhere along the way, I accepted that when I chose to pursue being a business coach, I was automatically going to be at a disadvantage. And when I decided I was going to speak on strategy and on systems, that it was automatically going to make it harder for me to sell in that arena. And I chose to do it anyway because I want to buy from more women that are teaching me systems. I want to buy from more women who are teaching me strategy and how to think about things, not about how to survive the guilt of being a woman, but really, how do you set up key performance indicators for your business? How do you choose your priorities? How do you deal with talent management, acquisition? How do you do all of those things? I really would like to be having that conversation. And I have found that to be so challenging to find mentors that are having that more serious conversation. And I find that a lot of the female entrepreneurs that I've met along the way so far anyway, they reduce things down to simple explanations like, oh, that's masculine energy and you're in your feminine energy. And I'm like, that is a load of bullshit. Like, why is it that ugly men can be shown on websites and social media, but women have to go through 3 hours of makeup and hair to solve a pretty problem, an acceptable problem? And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna be me, whether I'm all done up or not done up. I chose to do up a little bit today, but I did really just sort of accept that's not automatically going to be enrolled in by other people. So what's your take on that?
Okay, man, that's spot on. It's interesting that you're saying this because a long time ago also, I worked in a male dominated or male saturated, as my colleague calls it, environment in the aerospace industry. So I know what it's like to be sort of like you, engineering space. I'm not an engineer, but I was in an engineering company.
Oh, I never worked a day in my life as an engineer, just for the record, everybody. I was a consultant and I worked my way up through the strategy practice. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, with that said, I know what it's like to work in those environments and how, I get the idea of like masculine energy, feminine energy, and like recognizing that sometimes we do end up contorting ourselves to fit into and be able to be successful in those kinds of spaces. I have many, female mentor leaders who did that very thing in order to be successful. So I can appreciate that to a degree. But like you, I feel like it's a little too reductionist to say masculine energy, feminine energy, and you just using that as sort of like the answer to the thing. I would much
another
rather
off-ramp, in my opinion.
It is. I would just much rather lean in and say, you know what, this is the thing I'm doing. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of noise, a lot of barriers, a lot of things in the ecosystem. But at the end of the day, I was put on this earth for a reason, and I'm committed to making that happen. And I should also say, you know, I don't really subscribe to the idea of like we're going it alone. That's why I think, you know, organizations like the one we're a part of and other places where we're surrounded by people, particularly women who get it, who are equally committed, I think are so, so powerful, because we need that, you know, sort of that, you know, that force behind us to kind of keep the momentum going, and we can't do it alone. But a lot of that starts with each of us and our willingness to be committed to the larger picture.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I found really challenging was learning to get picky. You know, learning to get picky about who are you receiving your mentorship from? What communities are you a part of? What conversations are you going to indulge with which friends, and which ones are you not going to participate in? Because you've got to have like a lot of clarity about where you're going and where you're headed. You know, I do feel compelled to mention, you know, Jessica and I, we met in a incubator. I don't host that incubator. I'll include the link below so that you can go check it out. It is for women who are generating at least $100,000 in their business so far. So it's not going to be right for everybody at every stage, but I want to make sure I include that in the show notes. Super, super cool. So Jessica, oh my gosh, I really could have a 4-hour episode with you. Seriously, but I am really curious, what are you working on next? And by the way, you mentioned your speech on International Women's Day. I actually closed my business on that day. I have it as a company holiday.
It's amazing. I mean, it is on a Saturday this year, which is super nice that we can be celebrating that way.
Saturday, yeah.
But that's a really good nod. I mean, a recognition like this is a day for us and for change makers around the world. Yeah, totally.
1,000%. I need to check with my assistant. I hope we have Friday off. But yeah, like I just decided along the way that I was going to declare that day an observation for everybody on our team, and I'm really glad I did, because
that.
It's a big part of my story. So Jessica, what are you working on next?
Yeah, so the work I'm very focused on, as you may have noticed, things are kind of a bit of a mess here in the US. And I'm finding myself really, really galvanized and focused on doing everything I can to support women's voices. So this is very much in alignment with the work I have largely been doing. But I've been thinking a lot about, you know, what does it take to get your big idea out there? So let me just say really quickly, when I say the word big idea, what I'm talking about here is not necessarily some Pulitzer Prize winning idea. It's not some brand new invention, although it could be. What I'm really talking about as a business owner is, what is your unique perspective or your unique point of view that challenges the status quo in your industry? So most of us as entrepreneurs have thoughts, we have perspectives on things that are happening in the industries that we're working in, that when we look at it, we think, yeah, I don't really agree with what I'm seeing here. You know, you see this a lot in the coaching industry. This is a great example where there is a lot of sometimes shady practices. There's a lot of inappropriate practices. And if you're just sort of going along with that, you kind of fit into the flow, right? Entrepreneurs who are using their unique perspective to challenge the status quo, for example, that's when they start to create demand. That's the thing that begins to differentiate them in the market. And so I really want to help people take all those, you know, I said it earlier, these like scattered ideas that are in our head, you know, and we have a lot of them because we are very nuanced people with lots of experiences and expertise that have shaped us into the people we are. But taking all of those scattered ideas and creating this very bold, aligned message and using that as a tool to help you create visibility in your business, to put you in a place where you are leading or engaging in conversations in your industry that do push back on the ongoing narrative, or, you know, are challenging a paradigm that we have sort of accepted as fact when maybe it's not. So the work I'm doing now is very much about helping people do that, and then really building up visibility and recognizing that visibility, as uncomfortable as it can be, is essential to moving the needle forward in business, right? If we
100%.
Yeah, I don't need to explain why visibility is important. But I do think that we tend to, like you said, we minimize. We're like, oh, I haven't done my hair and makeup today. Oh, I don't feel great in my body. And sometimes those are days where, yeah, you just say, I'm not going to do it today. But it can't be the same every day. We have to be willing to put ourselves out there. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable in the process. And I think it's that discomfort that tells you that you're on the right track. Not extreme discomfort, obviously, but that swirly feeling that you get in your gut when you're about to say something, when you're about to do something, when you're about to put something new into the world. Like that swirly gut feeling is usually an indicator, like, I'm doing something that's uncomfortable. And then we get on the other side and we recognize
matters. You got to do what matters, right? And that's my whole motto. I've got it tattooed on my arm. Like, it is something that is so super important, because you're the only person that gets to decide what matters. And for, again, like those off ramps of like excusing ourselves from showing up, excusing ourselves from social media. Hey, I struggle with the exact same thing. But one of the things that's really helped me is, like I said, it's like, how can a relatively unattractive man show up every day, scruffy, unshaven? He's getting more miles on his journey because he showed up today. So
correct.
That's why, like, I had body dysmorphia and body image issues when I started, especially, and I've worked through a lot of those things. But to your point, it's actually a strategic advantage to decide, like, I'm gonna be online without makeup. That's actually an advantage,
Yeah.
One of the things that drives me kind of crazy about the coaching industry is that it's so status driven. Most people who become coaches, they may not know it, but they're doing it because they want significance. They want to turn their experience into something that has significance in their life. And where that gets perverted in our industry is it becomes all about followers, like follower counts, and all about the show. And I think that there is an element of visibility where you are performative and you are showing up and you are cultivating an experience for your audience, and that is considerate of your audience. But I think the thing that I decided to take a stand against that paid off monetarily, y'all, was the idea that instead of you building like this crazy presence on a rented platform, focus on helping your next 5 people. Right? Like, look for the next 5 people. And if you just change that mindset, that has been my mindset like the entire time on my journey. And I've had evolution, I've had change, I've learned. And the thing that I figured out really early that allowed me to even be here is help the person in front of you. Like, be completely present with those people and stop counting yourself out of the game because of some status symbol, ego driven BS. Like, attach your ego to the process and to helping actual real human people. And what happens is that compounds over time, that you end up getting status anyway, because you earn a reputation of being somebody who actually shows up and helps. So when I put that into all my messaging, it just like, it's so beautiful. Opposite land to make $1 million in 90 seconds,
Oh my God. Okay. I'm not even going to jump on that soapbox because I will lose my mind. I want to acknowledge 2 things that you said that I think are so powerful. One, it's about the people, right? The minute you shift your eyes away from people, human beings, and the fact that these are real challenges that they're facing in whatever form of coaching or service provision that you do, the minute you shift away from that and you start focusing on, like you said, the status, the numbers, the et cetera, that's when the game changes, and not in a good way. And that's not to say don't be aware of your metrics, right? Like, you should be aware of your KPIs, your numbers, et cetera, but not from the perspective of, or not in lieu of focusing on people. And so that idea of like the next 5 people, I think is really powerful. And the other thing that you said that I think is worth really highlighting is about using this, I call it stages of your own making, but the places that you own, right? There's just so much push around social media. And if we've seen nothing in the last, 3 or 4 months, it's just how untenable social media is. We don't own those spaces. We're essentially renting them, and the game changes all the time without notice. And so for me, it has been very much about figuring out, at least for my clients, where does your voice belong and where is the stage that you own? So for some people, that is an actual stage. For others, it's their blog. In my case, that's my blog. It's my podcast. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's something else. But really be focused on what spaces do you own and really go all in on inhabiting those.
Jessica, again, we could do this for 4 hours, but that's not our format. So what is the best way for people to fall in love with you? Where do they follow you? Where do they find you?
I spend the vast majority of my time on LinkedIn, and I'm at Jessica, or actually I'm not Jessica. I am Jessica, but over there I'm Jess-Sato. And when you pop over, there's tons of resources. The one I'll point you to, and we didn't dig too much into this, but with respect to the big idea, I know a lot of times people are constantly questioning, is my big idea big enough? Or is my idea good enough? And I have a BOLT assessment over there that is really a tool to help you think about, is my idea, does it have what it takes to fill the space, to cut through the noise, to move the conversation forward? So if that's of interest to you, you can grab it over on LinkedIn.
I am 1,000% going to check that out. That sounds amazing. Jessica, I just really want to thank you for such an incredible interview. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And listener, hey, thank you for listening. It's so awesome that you took the time to do that. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And you know what? Those 5-star reviews that you leave, they make a huge difference. So if you can take 30 seconds and reward Jessica for her amazing effort today, we would really be grateful. It just helps people be able to decide whether they want to spend time with us. And if you really got value today, like that review honestly makes a huge, huge difference. And in fact, if you loved what we were talking about, go ahead and grab the link to this episode, share it with 3 of your friends, and they can be part of the conversation as well. Thank you so much for joining us for the Amanda Kaufman Show. We will see you in another episode.